Hello and welcome to the 18th NFT Guild Roundtable. Today we have Adam Dean here with us to talk about his new Cardano improvement proposal that focuses on native asset policy registration slash information certificates for native assets on Cardano blockchain. Thank you for coming, Adam, and excited to hear your presentation and breakdown of this proposal. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, inviting me on. So this whole thing has been a long time coming, a long time in progress. But essentially, the crux of the matter is that right now we have a lot of different use cases for native assets on Cardano. And it's not as straightforward as it is on other chains where we can look at a contract and say, that's the type of token that this is, and this is how we treat it. So to that end, what I've done is developed this CIP, Cardano Improvement Proposal, that aims to be more explicit in terms of registering what different feature sets a token should have or support, allow dynamic updating even after native scripts have become locked and no new tokens can be created underneath them, still give the project creators an opportunity to update and change things like names and logos and badges and things like that, social media handles, and put this information on chain, because right now, historically, what we've had is a lot of off-chain separate people running separate databases to try to kind of aggregate all of this information, and having good kind of condensed amounts of information on chain is good for everybody because we can look at a single source of truth and determine that is a valid update versus just kind of taking the trust me bro stance that we have currently. So this SIP is going to cover everything, but for purposes of today, it's going to apply to most native assets, but for today's meeting and purpose, the real big thrust of the SIP is how it relates to NFTs, specifically when it comes to policy or collection registration and royalties as well, on-chain royalties. So starting off, what came about, some people probably remember that I'm not a big fan of CIP 68 and that solution for storing metadata on chain from a personal perspective. So Alessandro Ailes from Space Buds and Nami and everything else that he's done, and I had a pretty public on Twitter back and forth about it. And then we kind of went quietly and sat down and had a meeting together. And one of the big issues that was presented was that you can have things like a smart contract on Cardano that mints tokens. And currently, the way CIP 25 works, a potentially malicious actor could use the CLI, mint a token from something like a DEX liquidity pool, and actually attach CIP 25 metadata to make that token be called poop coin and have a poop emoji that it displays as, or potentially contain illegal or illicit content. So that's where this idea came from of explicitly declaring the feature set that tokens under a policy should support. Does this policy support CIP 25? Does it support CIP 68? Is it a fungible token policy? If we can declare that on chain, then downstream explorers know exactly what they should be looking for and how they should be behaving. Like right now with CIP 68, one of the big problems of support is this a CIP 68 token or not? I don't know. I have to parse the asset name and then go and look and see if it has a reference token and then fail over to CIP 25. So hopefully this new standard, the idea is that you would already have observed that there's a registration for the policy ID that says these are CIP 68 tokens, or these are CIP 25 tokens, and you can take action accordingly to show the proper information. And so that's the big main thrust and reason and rationale for the CIP. And the other part of that is that we might have new standards in the future that we want tokens to be able to support. Things like fence maker and equine's metadata update Oracle standard, right? Maybe we want to use that for our tokens that were minted 2 years ago under a locked policy. Luckily, this new standard should allow us to just say, hey, here's a new registration for this policy, and now we support this Oracle standard. So be on the lookout, and here's the address we're going to use for Oracle. So again, we have a trusted, verifiable, on-chain source of truth rather than trust me, bro, to say, what sort of features and tools should we be applying to any given tokens on chain as we see them. And then, yeah, I mean, it gets into fungible tokens as well. Right now, a lot of NFT projects have things like fungible tokens. So a lot of people are probably familiar with the Cardano token registry, which is essentially a GitHub repository currently managed by Cardano Foundation. That if you want your token to have decimals, you have to do a pull request and have it approved by somebody at Cardano Foundation into a GitHub, so that wallets actually know that you have 2 or 5 or 6 or 27 decimals in your token. This standard, again, allows us, even with historic locked policies like the LQ tokens that were minted right at the start of the Shelley era, we can actually go back, assuming that projects have maintained their policy keys, they will be able to issue an on-chain registration and potentially get away from this GitHub source of truth and centralization that we have and put it all on chain. And that's really the big area of improvement that we see for fungible tokens in addition to non-fungible tokens. And aside from that, I'm still working out a lot of the details on this thing and kind of making it up as I go along, trying to do my best to document not only how it should look, but actual good, proper schema documentation, so that people that are programming tools could actually have schema validation to make sure that when these registrations go on chain, we don't have what we saw in the early days of CIP 25 and others, where everybody's just kind of playing jazz and doing their own whatever, making chaos for people like Smog at Pool PM and the marketplaces. Hopefully, we'll have an actual well-defined standard so everybody can parse and treat these these registrations equally and consistently. The idea being to save time and effort basically for everybody. Oh, I guess I should say that's one other point of contention that I wanted to accomplish with this CIP is eliminating a lot of data redundancy that we see in the metadata of tokens on chain. Unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about the old stuff. But historically, people, particularly using like CIP 25, have had to include things like, hey, here's the name of the collection, here's the name of the artist, here's a link to our Twitter or our link tree or our website in the metadata of every single token, meaning that that information is repeated 10,000 times on the blockchain. And if we look at Husky, we have like 420,000 different copies of some of the data that's exactly the same. Whereas the CIP allows us to put all those things at the top level and say everything under this policy links to this social media. So we actually save in the long run a ton of bytes when we extrapolate removing a single URL from every token under every policy that exists. I think we're currently at 8 or 9 million individual tokens with, I think, 50 to 60,000 different native asset policies out there. Specifically that have NFTs and metadata on them. So if we could remove, say 50 bytes from each one of those, the ledger size would actually be pretty substantially smaller than what it is today. So that's the other major driving rationale here for this CIP.
Before the start of the call, you shared with us some formatting examples. Maybe you can share your screen. I think that would be helpful for people to better visualize.
Okay, yeah, let me clean up my tabs because I don't normally share my windows because there's like 8 million tabs going, but let's see here. Okay.
Yeah, we got several otter AIs in the house and about 4 additional guests. Hey, Patrick on camera now. Feel free to ask Adam any questions. And yeah.
I don't really have a question, to be honest, but good. Do you have a link to the CIP?
Yeah, I'll drop it, the actual pull request here in a second. Let's see. Okay, we're gonna share.
Okay, got it.
That tab.
Nice.
Okay, so is that showing up properly there? I should be specifically on my 2568 registration page, I believe.
Yes.
Yes, it is. Perhaps you can zoom in a bit. So
Yeah.
the text is
Bigger.
No. There we go. Come on, Patrick, you're young. I know you got glasses, but us old people are supposed to be the ones that can't see good.
My eyes are getting worse by the day, it feels like, because I always only stare at screens and work at night.
Yeah, you got to
Yeah.
remember to blink. That's the important part.
True. Yeah.
Okay, so this is specifically the CIP 25 folder that I've added under, this is my CIP quadruple X. I'm calling this CIP 867 right now. That's the kind of JSON key that I've reserved or I'm trying to reserve for the purposes of the CIP. And it is because I'm a giant kid of the 80s, and 8675309. I've got your number. This is, my CIP to rule them all. So 867 is what I'm calling it. But for right now, CIP XXX in the classic CIP format. And one thing to note here is I've tried to maintain a CBOR-like JSON structure whenever possible. And again, the rationale behind that is saving bytes on the ledger because we use numeric indexes rather than text labels, and we bypass issues like capitalization or improper spelling or mislabeling of fields when we refer to index 0 or index 1 is always going to be the project name rather than, oh, did they call it name or project name or artist name or collection name? We avoid a lot of that confusion by using numeric indexes, and in the heart of how data is actually stored on Cardano and serialized, we use a CBOR-like structure, which also helps with canonicalization as well, because we're probably all familiar with how it doesn't really matter how you shove the JSON into the blockchain. Downstream explorers like Pool PM or whatever are going to show it in whatever sort order they want. And so people have introduced a lot of hacky workarounds to make sure their metadata displays a particular way on a particular platform. So kind of CBOR eliminates some of that and again leaves it all up to the platform to choose how they display information, and your job is just to make well-formed information and put it onto the blockchain so everybody can parse it easily. I'm going to back up just a second here to the top level of the CIP because it's important to show kind of the overall view of what this metadata looks like. And so this has been updated on the screen right now as an example of how this CIP 25 registration would look for a particular policy. But if I get down here a little bit further, you'll see the entire data structure that would go in. Now, the beauty is this just uses a simple transaction. There is no token mint. There's nothing going on because we're actually signing with the policy keys to validate the information. And that's what allows the CIP to be backwards compatible for all tokens that have ever been minted, assuming projects didn't do something stupid like lose their keys. We start with some basic top level stuff. This is policy ID. For example, is index number 1. We have our feature set saying that this is a policy that supports CIP 25 and 27, which is our token royalty standard. We indicate what kind of signing we used. In this case, this is ed 25519. And there will be additional information added to the repo, but Martin Lang from Atata Stake Pool already has an open source software called Cardano Signer that makes it stupidly easy to sign these things. So it's actually really simple. It's already Node.js compliant or interactable, so you can actually add it if you have a node server, or it's got a standalone executable in the repo. So it's really easy to do the signings, and you can sign via either the CIP 8, CIP 30 format that you would like sign data when you log into a website, or you can do regular Cardano ed 25519 key signing. 4 is our nonce, which is a numerical index that just counts up essentially. So when we're looking at, hey, there's been 5 updates to this policy on chain, we should always accept the largest nonce value as the most recent and the one that should be trusted above others. Number 5 is a secret that I still have under my hat. But essentially it points to an oracle, an off-chain oracle, for additional information and context about these tokens, whatever they may be. That's going to have some fun use cases for both fungible tokens and potentially dynamic non-fungible tokens after I finish writing those up. And then we get into item 6, which is our actual CIP specific details that we're registering. So in this case, again, we can see that we declared support for CIP 25 and CIP 27. So we say under index number 6, here's our CIP 25 registration, and we subhead this under 1 in case because number 1 represents project information, top level project information. Which again allows us to add a number 2 in the future if we need more information or more context about CIP 25 tokens. So again, I've tried everywhere possible to make sure that the system is as flexible and future-proof as possible so that we can iterate on this into a new version or additional support without necessarily invalidating previous historic registrations. They just wouldn't have the same amount of detail or information. So our only required field is right here for CIP 25, which is, what do we call this thing? What's a user-friendly name for this policy ID? And again, traditionally, platforms have either had to have you go and register and say, hey, call this token Spacebuds or Jet Chicken or whatever. Here, we avoid that. Everybody can monitor the chain, see these registrations and go, this is Spacebuds. This is cool NFT project, whatever it happens to be. Then the next few fields are, to be honest, based on what policies would normally register on JPEG.store, token, Flipper, Plutus, normally right now you have to go to every marketplace and say like, hey, here's my policy, here's what it's called, here's the description, here's the image, here's the banner. Let's just put it all on the chain so everybody can get to it. So we have a description, which just like our NFT standards, if it's longer than 64 characters, break it up into an array of strings that are 64 characters. Here is our profile icon image, our PFP for the project. Here's a banner image that platforms can optionally use or ignore. Number 4 is our not safe for work, true or false flag. And then number 5 is the only place where we break from CBOR numerical indexes, and that is social media handles, because social medias come and go so quickly, and there's already a metric buttload of them. I didn't want to sit there and try to assign a numerical index to every possible social media that somebody might want. So I think this is where we're going to have some kind of marketplace coordination to say, hey, here's what we will support: Twitter, Discord, website, email, Linktree, you know, and then come up with a standardized set of keys that we look for. And then we look for a URI value that points to that resource. This is another area of standardization that I'm trying to kind of shoehorn into the chain and our modus operandi as we go about doing things. We saw this in the early days. We used to put IPFS as a key and just a CID as a hash in things. Then we switched to this IPFS : // but it only works for V0 and not V1 because of the 64 character limitation. But when we're talking about a URI, or we're looking at Arweave or HTTPS resources, what we have is we have a scheme and a path. So what I have written into the schema for this CIP 867 is that all data URIs should be an array with the scheme separate from the path. And the path is one or more up to 64 character strings, but the URI is always element number 0. So that way, again, platforms can look at it and go, ah, this is an Arweave, AR : // this is IPFS : // or this is HTTPS, and you can take the appropriate steps to turn that into your IPFS gateway, fetch content off of Arweave, get it from FTP, or any other source. HTTPS, obviously, just make it an image tag and you're good at the end of the day. And then finally we have number 6, and this is for project or artist name. And I do see some hands up. Cash, will get to you there in a second. So project or artist name is like, Virtua has, I think, like 87 different projects that they've minted on Cardano at this point. And so they have a 0, like this could be Cardano Island Vehicles is the name of this particular policy that all lives under the Virtua metaverse as a project label. And again, just trying to think forward and think like, if I was setting up a marketplace or an aggregator or doing pool PM display, what kind of information would I really want to get from the chain to know how to address and treat these different policies. And then we get into this is, I haven't fully documented it yet, but a replication of our current CIP 27 royalty standard. Again, the interesting thing here is that historically with CIP 27, the way we originally framed that forever ago was that you could only register one time, you couldn't change the amount of royalties, and you couldn't change the address. Potentially now we can, depending on how the market wants to treat and accept this registration. Maybe, we don't allow you to change the actual royalty percentage to avoid royalty hijacking, but you can change the address. And now, again, we have a trustable way to do that from a policy that's been locked for a year, or old rug pull projects that are still getting royalties, things like that, but they've transferred off the keys to new owners. So it gives us some flexibility to explore as a community how we want to treat royalties. And then we get down here into the witness block, which is essentially, this is the pub key hash that's found in your native policy script that says this key is allowed to sign. And then you sign with that key the entire number one data object. This whole chunk is what we're going to sign and witness, so that way people downstream can validate and verify, okay, yeah, that policy key did actually sign, so we can trust this registration. And that's what gives us our on-chain proof of ownership and control of the keys. And with that, I'm going to take a break and get a drink of coffee and let Cash ask his questions, since he's the first hand I see.
Awesome. Looks good, man. I really like it. I like everything that you said. It makes a lot of sense. It's definitely a big void that we have with a lot of projects and things that we're trying to do in the future. That said, I noticed when you got down into the meat, are we able to add stuff to this in the future, right? So let's just say, I don't know, MySpace comes back. Could we eventually add MySpace into this standard? Is there room for growth with it?
Yeah, absolutely. So for one, again, that's why I left this social media block as simply a regular JSON object of key value pairs, because I don't even want to go through and think, and I'm sure, especially when we talk about internationality and globalization of this spec, there's going to be social medias that might be used in other parts of the world that, us in America aren't even familiar with, and we don't know what they're called or whatever, so this really allows you to put something local in there that we don't have to go back and reinvent the CIP wheel every time to add a new social media. But the beauty of this is, we could go up to 64 characters with these indexes, right? So we could basically have like a 64 byte unsigned integer as a key. So if we need to add a 7, 8, 9, 99, 867, however many we get up to, we can keep defining new indexes to extend this out. And again, that allows to add new features in the future that do not break any backwards compatibility for existing registrations either. So if you're a project that minted tokens back in early 2021, you can start using this and providing updates to your information. Maybe that's changed. That doesn't match necessarily what's in the metadata of the tokens that are locked on chain. But if you submit a registration tomorrow and new stuff's added 6 months from now, you're not necessarily missing out, but you could go back and add those new fields. So yeah, that was the other part of that idea, is that by using numerical indexes that are always well defined and well assigned, we can define a new role or a new slot that needs to be filled and just give it a new index that hasn't been used yet. What this does, though, is kind of try to pump the brakes a little bit versus how we did things with CIP 25. CIP 25 was like, hey, you have to have a name and an image and then play some jazz and do whatever the hell you want, right? As long as it's valid JSON that'll go on the blockchain, it's good to go. But that's created some chaos when it comes to what are attributes, what are auxiliary information, what's relevant to filtering out traits. So I know firsthand, because I've done it with an Oracle setup, trying to look at every single piece of metadata on the chain. There's a whole lot of crap and a whole lot of non-standardized information, even though it represents the same info across different policies. So the idea here was that hopefully, if we do need to add a 7, we don't have people just start doing that. They actually come to the CIP, they push an update, make a pull request. We have a chance to communicate about it as a community, and then we together add index number 7 in here, and we all start knowing what that represents. So it does kind of make a more strongly typed standard than what we've seen historically with metadata. And Stakepool, you have your hand up.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for the run through. It has a lot of interesting new stuff as well. So great job on that. I would like to ask you one question about the witness part, the witness area. That has to do with the signing and the public key hash. For native scripts, this is part of the simple script file, so it's easy to make, right, and to make use of when verification. But for more and more Plutus smart contracts minting policies, this is not available, at least not easily, because it's logic. So we have looked at something similar from what you have described here, but we have looked at how can we verify the NFTs, the NFT projects. And what we looked at then was how can we also verify this for Plutus minting policies. So have you made any thoughts into this, or how do you see that going in the future? Because this is meant for the future, so how can we handle this?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I take a pretty dim worldview of minting NFTs via a smart contract. That's an absolutely stupid and asinine use case of smart contracts, especially as they exist on Cardano, because selling a digital collectible to somebody is not a point where you require decentralization. It's a stupid optimization that is unnecessary, and that's my raw, unfiltered opinion, and you're unlikely to change it, but you're welcome to present me compelling evidence to the contrary. But NFTs as digital collectibles specifically shouldn't be minted via a smart contract. A simple native script is all you need. This is a centralized interaction between a consumer and a business. So there is no necessity, especially now that we have things like multi-segmenting. There's really no compelling use case why we need to utilize a smart contract, increase transaction fees just to mint an NFT. With that being said, and because I'm not, I've tried to learn Haskell and Plutus, and it hurts my tiny little brain. So I'm not sure yet. We could develop the standard and maybe utilize something that's similar to CIP 27, how we use a nameless token. So if you're going to be minting via a smart contract, maybe there's a master key that can burn and or mint a nameless token under the Plutus script that could contain the same payload, and we could use validation by going, this is a script address and it's a nameless token, therefore this should be considered a valid registration, but it's going to take somebody with more of a thought and knowledge of how Plutus works and what is and is not possible to make sure that this is workable for smart contract solutions as well.
Yeah, great. I can say that one thing, I agree regarding the NFT part of this, but we also need to think about how tokens are created in the future. So, but one thing that we have thought about is to make use of minting of a token of some sort and add this metadata as part of that token, for example, because then you prove that you can mint with the policy. So yeah, one input for that.
Yeah, that's where using something similar to CIP 27 and that beacon token, that nameless token, to prove, hey, I have control. I'm the person that deployed this smart contract. Therefore, I've attached this 867 payload to minting a nameless token, which should be otherwise impossible to come out of the smart contract, is potentially a way to allow that to happen. And yeah, I mean, it could just be that this is a CIP as written right now that's only good for native scripts, right? But we do also already have, there's a beacon token CIP that might, again, maybe we just borrow and use the same payload structure, but we're looking for something different in regards to a smart contract policy while utilizing the same payload, so that parsers and looking for information can utilize that info or utilize this payload structure while still providing the same witness structure. The big goal with the witness structure, because we could say, hey, going forward, this should all be attached to the nameless token, just like we do royalty tokens right now. That would be an easy way, and it's great for all future projects. The main idea behind the witness here was to allow locked native script policies to provide that same level of context and updates. Yeah, I mean, maybe that's just a minor tweak to say like, hey, this could be on a nameless token during a mint, or you can provide the signature. It could be an either or.
Yeah,
and maybe that's
sorry.
here in this section 3 where we describe the signature method. Maybe we could say, hey, look for token, look for minting of said token as proof.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is actually particularly kind of poignant for fungible tokens more than anything, where you might have an automated, like JED could potentially be automated where you just buy tokens by minting them or sending them in to burn sort of thing, right? And extracting some amount of liquidity. Notwithstanding all the concurrency and other issues that you would run into trying to do that. But yeah, so particularly for probably more for fungible tokens, having a solution for Plutus scripts would be helpful. That's definitely a place where we're going to need more feedback though from more knowledgeable community members than myself. Yeah, to that end, are there any other kind of further questions or thoughts or feedback?
I'm still digesting a bit. I think it's really cool. I think it's a step in the right direction. Like I said before, like there's a lot of projects where I could see getting good use case out of this. And even more so than that, just having a general standard for all the marketplaces and service providers to use is alone makes this whole thing worth it, in my opinion. So, I'll take a better read through it, but for all intents and purposes, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, and when you have things like I do, like our NFT update cards from season 1, where there was I think, and even season 2, I think we were doing a new policy for every single card. So I have something like 30 or 40 different policies that currently I would have to go to Plutus and JPEG and everybody and provide the same information that says this is NFT update episode 1 cards, and here's a picture and here's a banner and here's my social media. And I'm honestly a really lazy developer who doesn't want to do that. So my goal is to create a new format where I could just publish something once to the blockchain and not have to go and do that for 4 or 5, 8, 10, 15 different marketplaces throughout the rest of time. If I can put something onto the chain once and everybody can use it, then great. I can support the community who has those collectibles in their wallet without me having to constantly be present and know about every new marketplace that's opening up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we had Benjamin's Club. That was, I don't know, every artist was a new policy, right? So when you start to think about those types of things, cars, if we end up doing car titles on the blockchains, right? Make and models, different policies for different car makers. Like I could see there being a big use case for something like this. I love it, dude. And not only that, but just it keeps, once you peel back the layers, there's more and more benefits as you were going down, just in the royalty token. I think that that's something big that a lot of people don't really think about. And in this extent, would it basically give the marketplace the capability of reading that and automatically applying it?
Sort of, and that is a feedback that we got from Michelle with Harmonic, who are I think doing the Plu.ts development, was that, and so in the CIP 26 specific information. What we actually added, and I just added this the other day, I think it's the 8th field. Oh yeah, disclosure documentation, an inline datum reference point. So this is probably something that we'll add specifically to CIP 27. But so if a policy can come in and say, hey, here's a verifiable validated proof of my policy, what we can also do is say, hey, here's a UTXO that contains an inline datum that has my royalty information in it, which would allow us to reference that datum in a smart contract execution to say, hey, here's the royalties. You must pay 0.05, which is 5%, and it has to go to this pub key hash. So a smart contract could actually just reference that versus necessarily having to have all the logic baked in. But again, I'm not a smart contract developer, so I don't know exactly how all that would tie together and work. But yeah, the idea would be allow people to publish that kind of information in a smart contract consumable way that our off-chain logic could say, yes, we trust that this is the legitimate royalties for this project. And ironically, it also gives us a little bit of, because right now royalties are somewhat opaque because we can go to a marketplace and just tell them, hey, I know what I registered on chain, but I actually want to change my royalty percentage to this and send it over to this address. And without going and actually like doing some blockchain sleuthing, we can't necessarily see that wallet and maybe how much or how little royalties have come into a project or where those royalties have gone. Where in this fashion, if a project registers their royalties on chain, particularly in an inline datum, it's kind of there, easily digestible for anybody to go and analyze, you know, things like tap tools and other CNFT jungle and CNFT tools could go and look at it and be like, hey, this project has earned, you know, here X number of royalties over the past period. Again, for some more transparency and accountability when we're talking about what's going on behind the scenes. You know, we love to have these little gotcha moments, especially on social media. And so that's, if you read through it and you look at this guy in CIP 26, disclosure documentation is going to be the next big interesting CIP push to come from me. And you heard it here first, may or may not be what Cardano FUDs is all about.
You mentioned earlier adding information to the registration. What about updating information? What kind of mechanism do you envision there? And I'm asking this question also in the context of, could it maybe be possible to integrate it with CIP's 86, which Fencemaker is the author of? You referenced it earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, what we would see here is in our feature set, you know, so the beauty of this is that as long as you have the policy keys, you can keep updating your registration. So if your Twitter handle changes or your website changes, submit a new registration. And as long as your nonce value is constantly increasing, the most recent registration will be the one that's accepted. This is how CIP 36 actually defines Catalyst voter registration, and that was the inspiration for it. Specifically when we start talking about vote delegation, but that's a whole horse of a different color in the governance sphere. But so the idea would be, okay, well, we have a CIP 25 and 27 policy, and now we're going to spin up one of these Fencemaker style CIP 86 oracles to publish data. So we would add 86 here to this array of feature sets that we support, and then we'll add the relevant information here to say, here's the address that is our Oracle address. Here's, whatever information a downstream explorer might need to then go, okay, I'm now monitoring and watching this policy, and I'm going to look here at this Oracle. And I kind of alluded to it as well, but there's a reason that this URL says oracle.mycoolnftproject.io, because we're also going to look at off-chain oracles for centralized data that doesn't necessarily need to be on chain, but still allows things like evolutionary NFTs or upgradable stats when we're talking about centralized things like gaming, where all the information doesn't necessarily need to be on the blockchain and bloating up the ledger to still provide dynamism to your NFTs.
Oh, cool. Thanks for the answer and the clarification.
Yeah, I think I need to still address CIP 27. Patrick and NMakers did standard with IMX, and then probably Fence Makers Oracle standard as well, to kind of define a schema for how we would show support for all of those different things. And yeah, it'll definitely be an ongoing thing, right? As we develop a new use case for native assets on the chain, how do we register and define support for that specific standard in this overarching policy registration standard? So that way we have a source of truth for what do these tokens do, what should we be looking for, and then we can use those individual CIPs and evolve and iterate on those to refine their own functionality specifically. So we don't kind of muddy the waters too much in terms of trying to put everything into one CIP. But also if authors of CIPs want to go, hey, here's how you could integrate my CIP into 867 and follow kind of the format I've laid out, so I don't have to keep redoing it and updating it every time you create a new CIP, that would be awesome too. You're not going to hear a complaint.
Any other questions or things to add? Any other? If not, then let's wrap it up. All right. Well, thank you all for coming to NFT Guild Roundtable number 18. Thank you, Adam Dean, for presenting, and Cash and David and Patrick and Sent and Anne-Marie and Rares and Kavinda for showing up to witness this CIP evolution and the discussion ensuing. Have a great day. Peace.
Thanks,
You
guys.
too.